One of my favorite things is formatting the memory card right before you're about to start a new video. It's the best feeling. More to use in my new parking brake that I installed last episode. It's great. One of the nice things about this whole project is even though it was a pretty big commitment pulling the whole body kit apart, the car is still very drivable because I haven't touched the engine or the drive line. So if I need to flip the thing around in the garage or something, it fires right up. A pretty clever trick that I always do when I'm filming my videos is I wear a lav, and what that is a little wire that goes in your shirt, and I connect that to a DJI wireless mic that goes right to the Pocket 3. I always love sharing the knowledge. We're flipping the car around today because we're gonna fix up the inside of this trunk. So, hold on. It's always one of those out of sight, out of mind things that I never really wanted to spend the time to make nice, but it's gonna be so easy to get it looking sick. So first thing I gotta do is get it all cleaned out, get all the crap out of it. Painting it is definitely what makes me the most nervous. It'll definitely be the most time consuming and it's the easiest to mess up. It's always a good opportunity to learn and hopefully it'll come out really nice. I'm not exactly a great painter, so we'll see how it all turns out in the long run, but it's always a great opportunity to learn and refine a skill. The wire harness is just gonna get a quick refresh with kind of that sleeving tubing that I've done before, so that should be pretty fun to get that looking nice. Should be pretty simple. Other than that, we kind of messed up and got a whole bunch of overspray in here when we painted the interior. I didn't really do a great job of masking the rear area off, so a lot of stuff came in and got all over everything. Luckily, a lot of it's just old tools and stuff like that, which I might just throw away anyways, but some of the stuff like the battery and the breaker switch and the air ride manifold, I don't want overspray on that, so I'm gonna do my best to clean that up. I'm a little bit upset with myself for leaving all this crap in here for so long. It's probably been in here for a year. Just all these tools and stuff are really rusty and it kind of ruined them, unfortunately. Before I can take the air ride stuff apart, you have to get all the air out of the system. So it's easy to get the air out of the bags. You just lower the car down. And now there's about 150 pounds of pressure trapped in the tank. And I thought I had a Schrader valve on this. I definitely have one on my E30. A Schrader valve is just that valve that you use to pump up your tires. You can put them on the tank and use any air compressor to pump up your tank if you're ever in a pinch. It also makes it a lot easier to get the air out of the tank. I'm gonna have to figure out how to do that. I don't really wanna just unscrew something and have it like shoot off, but that might just be the move, is to just very carefully loosen up one of these fittings and kind of just let the pressure slowly bleed out. I don't think that I can actually pull one of these push to connect valves out when it's full of pressure, but I might give that a shot too. So yeah, I was not able to get that push to connect out with 150 pounds of pressure behind it. Those things kind of use the pressure to stay tight, so the more pressure, the tighter they get, the better the seal gets. All right, I'm getting impatient, so figure the easiest way to do this, and probably not so dangerous way, is just to cut one of the push to connect lines and I'll replace it. That was a lot easier and faster and not too dangerous, so let's get on with it. Now that there's no air pressure left in the system, you can see how easily these push to connect lines come out, and it's a pretty ingenious system. They might seem kind of cheap or lazy, but I think it's actually an industry standard and a lot of different applications use this, even semi-trucks. I haven't really made my mind up on where I want to put the manifold when I put this all back in. I don't hate the spot that it's in right now, but I always wanted to have it mounted up really high so that you couldn't really see it. The only thing is they tell you absolutely do not mount it upside down, because where all the functioning components are in the top, and if any type of condensation gets in here, it needs to be able to run down and drip out the bottom. I think what I might do is make a L bracket, that way it's still holding straight up and I can put it up high somewhere where you won't see it, maybe in the corner over here. So that might be pretty cool. We'll see how it all looks when we get down to that part. Everything's out of the trunk, but I don't think I can quite paint it yet. I definitely need to clean it up and get some of the seam sealer off of it if I want it to look really nice. There's a little bit of surface rust too, and just some dirt and some crud in there, so I think it'll be worth it in the long run, but it's definitely gonna take a while. I spent the rest of the day yesterday getting all of that seam sealer taken out and getting the trunk sanded down and prepped. And I do remember myself saying something at the beginning of this video about how this was gonna be easy, and that was a really dumb thing to say because it has not been. I'm gonna take the delete panels out, which kind of sucks because I went through all the work to put them in already, but it should be pretty quick. I just really don't want any paint coming towards the front of the car because It's gonna get all over the really nice seats and the dash, and that's not gonna look good. So need to make sure that's properly masked off. Probably gonna take the trunk off and paint the bottom of that white. Maybe I'll just do that in the driveway or something, but we should be painting here by the end of the day, hopefully, and then I'll have a nice white trunk to start putting everything back in. I don't really have a way of getting these airlines out of the rear shock towers, because in order to get my hands up in there, I would have to air the car up and take the wheel off basically, but I think I'm just gonna cut them off for now. I'm gonna replace them. This one on the passenger side you can see is pretty clearly damaged. I'm not sure if that happened with us just messing around with things. You can see pretty easily how easily these lines could fail if they're not properly secured or if you're not using things like bulkhead fittings. I covered the idea of the bulkhead fittings on a previous video in the front, and it keeps the airline from moving in and out of the firewall so that it doesn't get damaged and rupture. I think this thing is about as ready as it's gonna be to paint. I don't have a lot of paint left. It should be enough for one coat hopefully, but I'm probably gonna be driving to the paint store tomorrow morning to get some more so I can do a second coat. There is so many holes in the back of this car. All these screw holes and things from the factory, that places that wires go through, and you know where the taillights used to go. So made sure I plugged all those up because the paint will literally come like spraying out of there and get all over the garage. So yeah, let's just see how it goes. All right, the paint that I made seems very watery, so I don't know, maybe I put too much thinner in it, or maybe it's fine. I'm not experienced enough to really know anything about this, so let's just see. While I'm waiting for that paint to dry, I've got something really easy that I can accomplish. I found some door molding that looks exactly like the OEM, and I kind of made a joke about it that you could probably buy this at a hardware store, and I basically did. I want the molding to go all the way from the B pillar to the A pillar. The OEM one doesn't because there's a plastic flashing here where this door trim is, and the molding stops there. So now that I've found this giant roll of this stuff, I can make it not only new, but go all the way from start to finish. This is definitely pretty easy. You just kind of knock it on here with the mallet. Worth the $20 for sure. Hardest part is I can't get the door open all the way because it's hitting the wheel on the wall over here. Not really sure what I'm going to do with the other 20 feet of that, but who knows, maybe it'll fit on the Quattro. It's pretty dang close. This one might be a little bit wider, but the Quattro one is very worn out, so maybe I should just put it in there and see. The first coat came out looking absolutely horrific, and I wasn't sure what to do. The paint didn't seem like it was sticking at all, and it was very thin. I figured I probably just had too much reducer, but I drove the Quattro out to the paint store, got some more, and when I got back, I realized that I was so busy trying to film everything on my red and getting cool shots that I was using the measuring cup completely wrong, and my measurement was probably more like 1-to-1 ratio with the paint to hardener rather than a 4-to-1, which is really, really far off. I just shot the second coat and it looks so much better. I'm still getting the sprayer dialed in, and my air compressor can't quite keep up. It's only a 7-gallon, so that's a little bit of a pain, but the paint looks so nice now. It's got quite a few little bumps here and there from bits of debris and dust, whatever, getting stuck under the paint, but it's just a trunk. It just needs to be one color, and then I want it to be shiny. I might even use that little touch-up gun that I have to make sure I get all the nooks and crannies, but I'll be very relieved to get this all finished up. I'm not a big fan of painting. I suppose if I was good at it, then maybe I would like it. I've showed you all how the push-to-connect stuff works with the plastic PVC line, but there's actually a variation of it called hard lines that's usually made out of aluminum or stainless steel. The thing with these hard lines is you have to permanently bend them exactly where they're supposed to go. It's very much more so a car show thing where you want to show off your air ride. The thing is most of these show cars, they have a trunk floor, so they're able to run the hard line through the floor and then convert it to a PVC line for it to go to each one of the bags. So I started thinking about it more and more, and I think with some creativity and some ingenuity, it'll work. So I bought some online and I hooked it up to my tank and filled that thing to about 100 PSI, and then I sprayed it with some soapy water to make sure there was no leaks. I put a Schrader valve on the tank before I did this, and I was mentioning how much easier it would be to get the air out if you had this, because you can put your filler on it with no hose connected, and then just hold the button here, and it'll just let all the air leak out. I got a zip tie so I can just walk away and let this thing drain. Before I get this tank all cleaned up and ready for the hard lines, I'm moving my fittings around. I'm gonna move my push-to-connect fitting over to this side because this is the side where the management's on. I don't know why I put it on this side. On this hole here, I'm gonna put the Schrader valve so I can, fill my tank up if I'm in a hurry with my air compressor. That doesn't happen very often, but you never know when you're in a pinch. And then this gauge, I have literally never ever looked at this gauge before. There's no reason that I would pop the trunk and look at it. So it's kind of pointless to have, and it's a potential leak. So I'm just gonna take this off and plug it just like I have plugged this one. I'm sure you all have used that nylon ribbon tape stuff for NPT fittings before, but when you have something like this where it's extremely important to not lose any air pressure out of it, it can be really frustrating even if you have a slow leak. I use this Permatex thread sealer. It's pretty much like thread locker, but it's made to hold in air. And I did every single fitting on the tank on this car probably about 3 years ago. It nailed it on every single one of them on the first try with 0 leaks. So I prefer to just use this stuff. It's not any harder to do. It takes about a day to dry before you can put any air in it, but it's definitely worth it just to do it right and have it functioning properly. I was originally going to powder coat this tank the same color as the heel plates on my car, that wrinkle black, but when the day finally came that I was going to take all the parts to powder coat, I was just kind of too lazy to actually go pull this thing out because it's a little bit of work. So I wanted it to be something different than the polish because I felt like the polish got scratched so incredibly easy. And my friend gave me the idea to just wrap it the same color as the car, which I think will be pretty cool. When I woke up this morning, I had pretty much talked myself out of doing a third coat on the trunk. I need to save some of the paint for the engine bay, but after looking at it with my really bright light, I think it would be a good idea to do it just so that you don't see any of that dark green paint showing through. It's absolutely chucking it down today. It is raining really hard. That's just Oregon for you. You know, one day it's really sunny, one day it's really rainy, but I don't think that'll cause any issues. I'm just gonna get this thing sprayed, air out the fumes from the garage, and then hopefully once it dries, I can start putting everything back in. I feel like a real experienced painter now. I'm up at 8 in the morning and I'm spraying my first coat by 9. I didn't really realize it till I had the gun dialed in a lot better, how much of a difference having good air pressure makes. And after about 20 or 30 seconds, it dropped. So kind of standing around a lot, but I'm almost done. Cleaning up this harness shouldn't be too bad. It's really just putting that expandable tubing on it and heat shrinking a little bit. I'm not really adding or subtracting anything. I might shorten up some of these wires for the air ride. They kind of give you like a universal harness for that. But I really need to make sure I find a key on so that the air ride knows when the car is powered on and off. I think this green wire is what that is, but if not, I might tie into the fuel pump, which could be a good or a bad idea, who knows. So we'll see when we get to that. I might plug this thing in with the battery in the car and test out a few things. You also want to make sure you burn the ends of these, otherwise they'll start fraying just about immediately and you won't have a very nice looking cover anymore. There are certain types of this expandable tubing that actually open up, but they're a lot less secure and a little less clean looking. You want to get one of the smallest pieces of tubing that you can get because you don't want this huge inch-wide tubing if you're only going over 2 wires. But the problem is even though this only expands to maybe 2 or 3 times its size, you still can't really get it over some of these gigantic plugs. So what you end up doing is having to de-pin the plug, and if you want to be really careful and not mess anything up, you kind of want to do it one at a time. So de-pin the plug, slide the tubing over it, slide the shrink tube over it, put it back in the plug, take the next one out, do the same thing again. That way you don't get anything mixed up because you don't want to get your wires crossed. Then you just heat it all up with the heat gun and you're good to go. But doing that with the 2-pin plugs aren't too bad, but when you get one of these crazy ones with 10 or maybe more sometimes, it can get really daunting. You just got to go one by one and eventually you get through it. After all that work though, putting the heat shrink on and shrinking that down is very satisfying. You want to leave a little bit of it exposed here and put the shrink over it because this heat shrink tubing actually has glue in it, and when it heats up, it's going to glue itself to that cord, and that'll keep the expandable tubing from moving. Once it cools off, it'll pretty much be stuck here in place. So I'm not going to pull on it too hard, but that will keep the expandable tubing from making its way down this if it ever gets pulled on. Pretty cool. If it couldn't get any more confusing, I also put a bunch of lengths of this larger shrink tubing down the harness as I've been doing each one of these. So now I've got these 3 separate ones here and then a big one, and this larger chunk of shrink tubing is actually going to act as kind of a keeper of all three of those inside of this larger tubing. This is definitely what makes the things like this look really cool and really nice, but it is complicated and you gotta really think it out ahead of time. If you mess it up, either you gotta just let it fly or you gotta start all over again. I think the trunk is dry enough now, it's not tacky anymore. I need to start putting a lot of this stuff back in so I can make sure that my harness is the correct length. First, I need to do the battery so I can power the whole thing and find that key-on power. And then, just kind of getting figured out where the air management's gonna go, and then I'll start thinking about hard lines. It's always a nice feeling putting all the clean, new stuff back in the car. I've also got these little plugs to try to dress it up a little bit and make it seem a little more thought out, just like everything else that I do on this thing. They don't fit that great in some of the holes, so I might buy some more. These are like plastic, and I kind of thought they were going to be rubber, but they were just some cheapo $10 Amazon ones. So some of them fit pretty good and some of them don't, but I'll see if I can get a few more sizes and get that all figured out, because there's a lot of little holes in here. It'd be nice to plug up most of them. I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself here, but I really wanted to take a crack at doing some of these hard lines because it kind of looks like a lot of fun to me, bending these up and getting them to fit just perfectly. I had an odd suspicion that something was wrong though when I started putting the line in the push to connect and they slid right out, which isn't how things are supposed to go. And then coincidentally, somebody reached out to me on social media and said that you're not supposed to use stainless steel for push to connect fittings because the little teeth on the PTC can't grab the metal. What will happen, worst case scenario, if this doesn't work, is under pressure, the line will blow out. What I'm thinking is I might do a couple of these lines, test them out, see how it's going, leave the car aired up overnight. I feel like if I can get 100 pounds in the bags, which is way higher than I ever run, and leave it for 12 hours, then more than likely it's probably gonna hold when I'm just driving the car for 20 minutes with 50 pounds of pressure. I'm gonna grab my air chock and see if I can fill this tank up to 100 PSI, and we're just gonna leave it overnight and see what happens. Unfortunately, the Schrader valve ended up being really close to my pump, so this might actually be a problem too. Uh-oh. So here's gonna be my process for making the hard lines. I've got this 2mm hobby wire that I'm gonna make up a shape with, and then I'm gonna copy it with the hard line. I'm guessing this next one is gonna have maybe like 5 or 6 bends in it, so let's just get going and see how it looks. I've also got this tool that straightens the line. I figure I should probably do at least half of it for now and get it nice and straight. All right, I hope this thing fits because it looks pretty cool, so I'm about to throw it in there. You can make a few adjustments here and there, but once you've made a 90, you're kind of stuck with it. I backed the first one off a little bit, and then I also just cut the tip off a little on the one side to make it shorter, so that was a good trick. But let's swing that thing in here and see how it goes. Well, it's not exactly 100% what I meant to do, but it's pretty dang close. And it looks pretty cool. So it's almost dead on, actually. I might just send it like this. That looks pretty awesome. You can see the old hose sticking out that goes to the bag, and I'll eventually pull that out and put the bulkhead connector in there so that I can cut this to the correct length, and hopefully that'll all go together. Unfortunately, this week is coming to an end, and I thought I would be a lot farther along on this trunk project. I kind of wanted to have it finished for this episode, but a few things are just taking a lot longer than I expected. Anytime I paint something for whatever reason, it just ends up taking like 2 or 3 days, which is ridiculous. But the hard lines are not working. They're leaking, probably because it's stainless, like that guy warned me out. Shout out to the dude from Bag Riders that saw that and warned me about it, so I appreciate that. I think I'm going to do copper instead, which would look pretty cool with the purple tank and the white, so it might turn out better anyways in the long run. I started digging into the wire harness back here, and I thought that was going to be simple, but there's a relay for the fuel pump and a relay for the air ride that were kind of in the way and making it impossible to put that sleeving over it. I couldn't get them depinned, so I started kind of making like a brand new wire harness for it, and I think that'll be really cool, but of course that's going to be really time consuming. I sat in my kitchen last night and kind of just tinkered around with it for a little while and got a little bit done on it, so it makes me feel a lot better. But I really want to say thank you everyone for watching my little mini series here on rebuilding my S14. It's been a lot of fun so far, and you're probably coming to it at the very best time right now, because in the next few weeks, I'll hopefully have some time to be putting the body kit on, and that's when this whole entire thing will start to come to fruition and the car will look really sick, because right now it still kind of looks like a piece of crap, I'll be honest. I took a beautiful car and really destroyed it, but it's gonna be awesome, and it'll definitely be ready for spring. So really excited about that. Thank you so much, everyone. Check your polarizers.